I was in a morning editorial meeting at my television station. I grew up around New York. I was born in Manhattan, so I was very familiar with the Twin Towers, been up in the Twin Towers, all that kind of stuff. And I had experience flying around New York. I had a student pilot's license at one time. And the first word that came in was that it was a small plane. And I thought, well, the Twin Towers are just massive structures. You don't just fly into them accidentally. And on top of that, the airspace around there is highly controlled. You can't move without an air traffic controller saying yes or no. So I thought, well, some poor soul just decided he was going to take his life in a spectacular way and take out a few other people. And then not long after that came word that it was a big jet. And then I knew something was very wrong, because big jets don't fly into the Twin Towers. It just doesn't happen. And at that point, as I recall, I think the meeting broke up because we knew something bad was happening, went into the newsroom. I remember calling my father, who still lives in the New York area, saying, turn on the television, a jet's crashed into the Twin Towers. And of course, we all sat there sort of stunned watching them unfold. And then the second plane hit, and at that point we knew it was no fluke that we were under attack. The initial reports I remember hearing, 50,000 people or so in each tower. You immediately wonder how many people have died. Like I said, I grew up in the New York area, so I wonder how many people I know or have family that are in that tower. Are they dead? Are they alive? What's going to happen? The pictures were spectacular, of course. You had the shots from the Empire State Building, all that stuff going on. And media almost instantly went into full-blown crisis mode because they knew this was going to be a big deal. Things throughout the course of the next few hours, of course, kept going from bad to worse. You hear the stories of the people jumping out of the windows and that kind of stuff, and the flames get hotter and hotter. The networks get engineers on board to talk about how the towers were constructed and how much heat can they withstand. And then comes that awful moment of truth when the first tower comes crashing down. And I was standing with a colleague of mine who also, as it happened, grew up in the New York City area and was very familiar with the Twin Towers. And I remember turning to him and saying, I just can't imagine something that big crashing. I mean, we're talking about structures that covered a city block and were a quarter of a mile high. They're just absolutely massive. I mean, the footprint of the World Trade Center complex, and sort of the area that was damaged, would completely cover downtown Cincinnati. It's as if everything from the river to Central Avenue was either destroyed or covered in debris and had been burning. It was a massive, massive area. And you knew at the same time that you were watching the deaths of thousands of people. You didn't know how many people. You didn't know how bad they were. There was an extraordinary video of people running away as those huge, massive gray clouds came billowing towards them and stuff. My brother works in Midtown Manhattan, just off of Times Square. And I remember, talking to him, especially later in the day, how scared everyone was, because no one knew exactly what was happening. We, of course, had the flight into the Pentagon, which reinforced things, and then we had the plane that crashed in Pennsylvania. People just wondering what's going to be hit next. The uncertainty of it all, I think, put a lot of people on edge. We knew it was bad. We didn't know how much worse it was going to get. I think my brother at home that they locked down Manhattan Island. I think he finally got home like around 11 or 12 that night. He walked a lot of the way. They found a car, was able to get off the island and get back home. It was a crazy, crazy day without question. I think some of my memorable, there's some moments in the course of the day that always stand out for you. There's of course, the planes going to the buildings. There's the buildings collapsing. People covered in dust and running to it and from it. At the end of the day, there was all that smoke just smoldering off of the tip of Manhattan Island. I grew up in a little town called Irvington, which is about 25 miles north of Midtown on the Hudson River. And talking to my family later, there was a park on the river called Madison Park, and people were gathered down there, and you could see all the smoke, 25 plus miles away, billowing off of the southern tip of Manhattan Island. And then there was, the shot from the New Jersey side where you had the smoldering ruins, and you still had the Statue of Liberty standing. You know, it was a very long, difficult day. Local news media, I mean, what was our role in it? The story was in New York. You wanted to try, you know, you couldn't help but wonder if there were people from here who had ties there, who might be visiting there, were somehow connected there. Those stories, of course, came out in the following days and weeks and stuff, and people trying to make frantic phone calls. So, you know, what was the role of us as local media? I mean, the story was in New York. You want to do something, but, you know, you can't take your eyes off those pictures. And in fact, we did do a couple of local things, but it was brief, because you realize that once you were doing something from here, it's like, you know, this is not what the story is today. And then you live with it the next day, and the next day, and the next day.
Is there anything about 9/11 that changed the way that you do your job as a reporter?
I think 9/11 had a profound effect on the news media. If you think about the stories that we were covering the 3 months before 9/11, the national stories especially, and the 3 months after 9/11, in that August beforehand, Bush made the decision about stem cell research, and you'll maybe recall that all the reporters were saying it's, you know, the defining decision of his presidency and the biggest thing he'll ever talk about. We had the Condon case, you know, and stuff like that. I think local news, to some degree, was more feature-oriented and stuff. And then this happened, and it was very clear what our mission was. I think on a local and national level. I mean, it was about breaking news, it was about hard news, it was about what needs to be done, certainly in the immediate days and afterwards, to protect the country. There were all kinds of things going on here in Cincinnati. I remember hearing people worried about Procter & Gamble, because it's a global company, global visibility. We had things, you know, with I-75, which is a crucial thoroughfare for the entire nation. The rail yards here are a big, big deal. You cut off those rail lines going across the Ohio River, and you've crippled a good part of the commerce in the central part of the country. There were some significant choke points that Cincinnati had to deal with, plus just the ramification of people seeing that their country was under attack, which hadn't happened since Pearl Harbor. And so it had a strong effect on the stories we did, what I think we saw our role was, and what the public expected of us. What was really important now? Well, it was pretty clear what was really important now.
Do you see any notable changes in Cincinnati since it came out, as far as an impact they have had?
I think that the changes you've seen here are similar to the changes you've seen everywhere. I mean, certainly the things like airport security and everything related to Homeland Security, Coast Guard, that kind of stuff, which are nationwide. I think probably the more meaningful changes are changes in attitude. The nation was under attack. We know that, if you look back at the decade beforehand, America sort of, was Pax Americana. The Cold War was over. We were number one. No one could touch us. Now we know we're vulnerable. So I think the biggest change is one of attitude. I had the experience that December, late December, early January, after 9/11, of being in Europe over the holidays, a couple of days before New Year's and New Year's. And we were at a dinner for New Year's, and people actually getting up and thanking us as Americans for coming overseas, because nobody was traveling. And spending our money, especially. But yeah, I think, it's changed people's worldview and what you really think you can take for granted. It's often said America is the last reigning superpower, but that doesn't mean that you're invincible, that you're not vulnerable. And people understand that.